Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. We have a very special guest today with us. We have Matthew from HOLOCHAIN. He is right now in India and I think that is his first meetup ever. So HOLOCHAIN is planning the first ever meetup here in India. We are at Mumbai right now and I have a great opportunity to meet him and learn more about HOLOCHAIN. There has been a lot of discussion of what HOLOCHAIN is, what HOLOCHAIN is not, and so this is an amazing opportunity for me to find out more about all about HOLOCHAIN. So thank you so much, Matthew. Welcome to India. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm a little sleepy. It's been a lot of travel, but I'm very happy to be here.
Amazing. So now, before we get into the project and learn more about HOLOCHAIN, would you like to just introduce yourself and kind of tell us what role do you play with HOLOCHAIN?
Sure. So I'm the Director of Communications for Holo, which is the organization that's bringing HOLOCHAIN into the world. And basically I run around the world speaking, doing interviews, things like that, trying to help other people understand what it is that we're building with HOLOCHAIN and why that matters.
Amazing. So, something that I have been reading a lot about, so there is something that I do know, that HOLOCHAIN is not blockchain. And this is something that everyone needs to understand, because HOLOCHAIN is also a currency which is hot, which I would want to learn more what all of that is about. But the first thing that we all need to understand, that HOLOCHAIN is not a blockchain, right? So could you tell us, first tell us what is blockchain, right, for everyone to understand, and then you tell us what is HOLOCHAIN and how is that different from blockchain?
Sure. Without going into tons of detail,
sure.
Blockchain is basically a way for a group of computers to come into agreement about a history of actions that have taken place amongst that group of computers. And the blockchain comes out of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin came out of the cypherpunk community.
Right.
That group of folks was really focused on one problem. They wanted to make it so that I can interact with you without somebody else hitting me with a stick.
Right.
And that focus on freedom from constraint by others got them mostly thinking about decentralization through the lens of anonymity. They wanted me to be able to interact with you without somebody else knowing who you are, knowing who I am, and they weren't confident that they could be certain that the government or whoever it was that they were worried about wouldn't become the other party that they were interacting with. So they wanted these parties to not know anything about one another. Because anonymity was their focus, they ended up coming up with a system that was focused primarily on digital anonymous cash, and that was Bitcoin.
Right.
Since the launch of the Bitcoin white paper in 2008, lots of other uses of blockchain, the underlying technology, have been proposed, but most of those uses haven't borne fruit. Most of those proposals haven't really delivered. And our take on it is because of the focus of that original architecture. So in order for us to be able to trust in the system without knowing anything about one another, the blockchain architecture basically makes it so that everyone holds on to a copy of everything anyone has ever done.
Right.
That is at least the case for the full participants in the network, the people that folks nowadays would refer to as miners.
Yeah.
But if you do that, you introduce all of these issues that have become widely recognized in the blockchain world: incredibly slow speed, high cost, huge wasting of electricity, and a very poor ability to scale.
Yeah.
We weren't trying to solve that same problem. Anonymous communication is important, but it's not the only issue, and there are other issues. We were focused on something slightly different, which is we want to be able to interact with someone not without being able to be detected by an outside party, but without having to rely upon an outside party. And that's a subtle difference, but it's a big one.
Yeah.
We wanted to enable people to be able to run applications whether that's a currency or a chat app or ride sharing or something else, without needing to have a company in the middle.
Yeah.
That's really because we were focused on enabling people to try new things, even if those new things only worked for them. They didn't also have to work for somebody else's business model.
Right.
For us, that's really important, not because it solves some corruption issue. The corruption issue is kind of what the blockchain folks were focused on. For us, it's important because it solves a complexity issue.
Right.
The complexity issue is, if you and I can't try anything new without it also working for Facebook, the community as a whole has a really hard time experimenting and innovating and actually surfacing new, more fruitful forms of communication and collaboration. Without going into a ton of weeds here, biological systems, your body, my body, whole forests, are built on top of this principle that two parties are able to find a way of dancing together without having to rely on some outside enforcer. We call it mutual sovereignty. But on a philosophical level, it's part of what drives us.
Right.
To get a touch into the tech, blockchain was trying to do trustless cash, basically, originally with Bitcoin. And this focus on trustless interactions really means that you and I feel comfortable interacting regardless of context, regardless of who that other party is. That's a thing. It's an interesting thing, but it's not the only problem in the world. And if you think about it, if you went out into the street and you met a person, but you have no ability to remember faces, and so you don't know if this is your wife, your sister, a homeless man, somebody else, how are you going to interact with them? If you have no ability to remember who someone is, you're not able to actually build upon the past experiences that you've had. And so you have to bear the full cost of learning everything over again with every single interaction.
Right.
Our focus with HOLOCHAIN was to create a framework for peer-to-peer applications, meaning that you and I and maybe a million other people, maybe 2 other people, can run a new way of communicating, a new way of coordinating, using just the devices of us, ourselves, that it is efficient enough that it can be run on just ordinary phones or laptops, etc., and that we don't have to rely on anybody else to make it safe, to enforce the rules. We can go into a little bit more details on how all that works, but that's the basic gist.
That's interesting. So basically, HOLOCHAIN allows the peer-to-peer communication, right, without relying on a third party. But also, it solves the biggest problem of carrying the data all over the place, because this is now, how does it? So what I was reading about this, that blockchain is more of a data-centric. So basically, every party who is trying to communicate, they have to have the whole ledger with them. And I think that's where the problem begins for blockchain, because imagine, I mean, every day there are tons of users who are coming on board, and each user is having some amount of data, and when you talk about every node running those data, imagine a node running like a data which is as big as Facebook. You can't even imagine that, right? So I think this is where HOLOCHAIN comes into picture, that you know what, you don't have to, the node does not have to carry that whole ledger, right? So it's more of a agent-centric is what I understood. Could you give us a little brief on how do you say that, what's the difference between this data-centric and agent-centric?
Sure. So imagine if your thumb had to keep track of everything that your left eye saw. And everything your right eye saw, and your tongue tasted, and what he saw, right? Imagine that. Would that work very well? No, but that's basically the blockchain approach. Oh, and your eye has to hold on to everything that each of those other things does, et cetera, et cetera. It's really a wasteful amount of effort. And in the natural world, good enough wins, right?
Yeah.
You don't wait until you are certain.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you did, something else is going to eat first. And so the patterns that end up persisting are patterns where an organism does a good enough job of finding food and mates and whatever in its context. It doesn't need to be perfect.
Yeah.
We don't sense all things. I'm capable of seeing light and hearing sound, but radio waves, my body doesn't pay attention to. I don't record that at all. I don't notice it at all.
Yeah.
HOLOCHAIN itself is a serverless architecture. With the World Wide Web, there always needs to be a web server in the middle. So when you send me a message on Facebook, you don't send it to me, you send it to Facebook. And then Facebook sends it to me. And when I reply, I don't reply to you, I reply to Facebook. And the content is held by them, and the ways of speaking are defined by them. Facebook decides whether I can send you a photo or a video or a payment or a rideshare request or a calendar invite. But the key thing here isn't the content, it's who's speaking it into being. Now, in the real world, this is where we're getting into agent-centric versus data-centric. In the real world, it's not just, the question isn't just, has this changed over time? Blockchain was really focused on a community ensuring that nobody was going back in and tampering with the records, right? So you sent me money, and we want the community to not think it's okay for you to also send that same money to somebody else. That was what the focus was. But we have a slightly different focus, and that is who spoke those actions into being. Now, if you said, Matthew is now a doctor of engineering, okay, you're able to speak that into being. Not many people are going to give me a job because you said that. If Harvard or Oxford or some other university speaks that thing into being, it has a different effect. Because the party from which that statement is coming carries meaning itself. It's not just that the words were spoken, it was that when that community says it, the source says it, it means something different. It means that I went through 6 years or 7 years of intense study with important people and that I've proved myself. Where information comes from matters. And if you strip information out of its context, you lose quite a bit. So for us, the agent-centric nature deals with the fact that we're using cryptography to make it so that when I make a statement, others can feel confident, yep, that statement came from this party. That we need to keep track of that in order for the community to maintain social coherence. We don't have to have everyone holding on to every piece of information that anyone has ever created. That's overkill. At the same time, the question becomes, well, how good is good enough? And from our perspective, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. If you and I are running some chat application, there's a certain level of effort and resistance to attack that we're going to feel comfortable saying, yep, that's good enough. Nobody is going to put in more effort than that because it would cost them more than they would gain. At the same time, if what we were doing was actually securing nuclear missile sites, and if someone was able to fraudulently trigger an action in our nuclear missile control application, that could have immense cost. We're going to use different security measures. We're going to be willing to go through more difficult tasks to ensure that that is secure than we will with some lightweight chat application where you're just trying to get your sweetheart to pick something up on the way home from work.
So basically, what I understand is that you can build your own consensus rules with HOLOCHAIN.
Consensus is actually not the right term for HOLOCHAIN. So consensus is how the blockchain folks, in an anonymous context, how they create coherence. The really interesting thing with this word, so you have a background and have been focusing on decentralization, right? Consensus points to the fact that blockchain is actually a centralizing technology.
Yes, it does.
Not a decentralizing. It takes a decentralized network of computers and centralizes their perspective into one view of history. That can be useful, but it has major costs. Imagine if you spoke a language, and the only way to add a new word into being was to have everybody agree that they would also remember and make use of that new word. That you couldn't actually, it couldn't leave your lips until that whole community had said, yes, okay, we will make use of this new word now. Now, we can call this conversation the orange wall conversation. We just invented a new word. And for you and me, if we later refer back to the orange wall conversation, we would know what that refers to. And the people who saw this video would know. But that's because we actually hold that information inside of our brains and bodies. We don't need a consensus in order to interact and communicate. Holochain enables the participants in a community to come to whatever level of agreement or alignment is needed for their particular use case. That could be everyone in the community agrees. You can actually create a blockchain. You could do Bitcoin on top of Holochain. But it could also be something where, hey, once 5 other people have held on to this and validated it, the rest of the community will treat it as if, yeah, it's been checked. At the same time, just like in real-world social situations, you make use of the vetting mechanisms, the filtering, the membership criteria that are appropriate for that context. Not everybody who walks into your building do you give a job to. You might put them through an interview process. You may ask them to introduce you to past references. And when you do that, you're building upon the experience that others have gained by interacting with this person to help you make a decision about what sort of relationship you want to have with them. And if at some point you hire them for your company, wonderful. Now you're going to train them to deliver the services or the goods that your company is focused on. But you're making a decision about who to bring into the community. That's one layer of security that you're creating. If that person betrays your trust in some way, the fact that you know their family, that you know their school teachers and their colleagues from other work environments, makes it so that if they betray your trust, they don't just lose you as a friend. It may cost them in other contexts as well. The ability for people to bring things into a social situation makes it so that others can feel comfortable taking a particular risk. They're imposing upon themselves potential costs that don't have to actually be realized costs. It's not like they're burning electricity. It's that they've put other social skin in the game. Same thing with Holochain. There is no one big Holochain. It's not a single giant app. It's not like Ethereum. It's a way of building applications. If you and I and 2 of the people at home wanted to build an application and run it on our own devices, we can. We don't need anyone else to know about it. The Holo organization might never even know that that exists. It's just running on your devices. Holochain is not a platform. It's a framework. It's a pattern for how to build and run peer-to-peer applications using the devices of the users themselves. You had mentioned one other thing, and I'll just point to it, and then we can get to whatever questions. Holochain is different from Holo. Holo and the cryptocurrency Holo Fuel, that has to do with a peer-to-peer web hosting marketplace that is built on Holochain. But it is not Holochain. Holochain has no built-in currency. The participants themselves enforce their own agreements. They don't need to get paid to do so, just like you don't need to get paid to speak Hindi. You hold on to the words and the capacity to speak words in Hindi, not because someone else pays you, but because you want the capacity that that brings you, the capacity to communicate with individuals, with whole communities of people, right? That's the reward for participating in a HOLOCHAIN app. In a HOLOCHAIN application, I bring my phone, and without needing an outside party to serve the website, what we do is I help serve the website. Okay. It's not a website, but yeah. Sometimes when you take an action, it lands with me. Sometimes it lands with other people. Yeah. I serve that, I store it, I validate it. But I only serve content that has played by the rules of the game that we've established. If it's something like Twitter, I'm not going to serve things that you try to speak into being that are 1,000 characters long. The rules for that app are 140 characters or less. Right? If it's a cash-related application, I'm not going to serve out to others your attempts to spend money when you didn't have any money in your account. Right? So Holo is an application built on top of HoloChain using that same pattern that enables people to get paid for serving websites to visitors, basically. And it does have a currency, but that's different from HoloChain.
Yeah, but that's not a native currency.
To HoloChain.
Exactly, because that's like Ether for Ethereum. It's not like that. So Holo, the currency itself is not a native currency for the HoloChain.
It's a single application.
It's a single, in itself is an application built on HoloChain.
That's correct. It's almost like, we have the World Wide Web, and Holo is a website. Right? And in that website, you have points in a game, or something along those lines, or stars in terms of star ratings. We have that form of currency, a form of currency that has to do with recognizing contributions that people are making in terms of their hosting of content to outsiders. Just to be clear, with HoloChain applications, I show up and I am both using the app and helping to provide the app. My device is doing some of the work. It's a tiny amount of work. If we were running a thing like Twitter, even with every person in India, right? Nearly 1.5 billion people running this Twitter app, over the course of a year, there would be something like 1 photograph worth of storage used on my device. That would be my cost of participating in that application. 1 20 megabyte photograph for a year's worth of use in this 1 billion person application. And each person would basically have used that much computing and storage capacity. We think that that's a low enough cost that people will be willing to bear that.
Right, absolutely. So tell us something, let's talk about building up the project, right? So I like, are there people, like, one of the things that which is good about HoloChain is that it's not a dream which is going to be coming out like most of the ICOs are. This is like a working project. Like the people are building their application,
they're building apps
already. So for the people, so something that you mentioned just now is it's permissionless. So nobody needs to take permission from HoloChain. If somebody wants to build a decentralized application, they can go ahead and build it, right? So tell us, like, what are the resources, what are the tools available for developers to build some sort of applications? Is there a guide available? And what kind of assistance do they get from HoloChain?
Sure. So the first thing I will say is HoloChain is permissionless in that you don't need permissions from us. Okay. But you can build applications that are permissionless applications. You can build applications that are permissioned, meaning, let's say, private. Yeah. You can build applications where the only people who the other members will recognize as participants are people who had a particular key that you gave them. Say, this is your private chat team. Because you want only the members of your private secret working group working on this. You don't want everybody in the world. So I just want to be clear that it's flexible in terms of how you configure those membranes, those criteria for participation. In terms of building HoloChain applications, our first release, our alpha, came out a little over a year ago, in October of 2017. And we did about 4 versions of that before changing to a new programming language. called Rust. So we'd written our alpha in a language called Go. We built a set of tools to make it very easy to get started building an app. And we had a wiki. We built out a little bit of a developer guide. But 6 months ago, we started working on a new version of HOLOCHAIN, and we just this month released the first version of that. And that's built in Rust. The reason that we did that change was that Rust enables us to build HOLOCHAIN applications that run native on mobile phones. It enables us to build HOLOCHAIN applications that are actually much more secure. Whole classes of security vulnerabilities go away thanks to the strong typing characteristics of the Rust language. It gives us the ability to configure HOLOCHAIN applications in some more dynamic ways. So we're able to break apart parts of an application. And some of those parts are able to run in just a web browser, meaning that in the future, people who are using HOLOCHAIN applications may not even have to install the app. They might be able to participate in an application just through their web browser, which is a pretty important shift. So those are the first pieces. In terms of developer support, we've done hackathons in 20 different countries. We've got meetup communities in 50 cities around the world and growing quickly. I think we had a dozen or so meetups last month alone. We have an online set of resources at holochain.org and specifically developer.holochain.org that walk people through building a HOLOCHAIN app step by step. Now, because this Rust release is brand new, the tools for getting started are still a little rough. We'll be honing those over the next 4 to 6 weeks. We do have a lot of material to help people get started, as well as videos and things like that. And we're creating more of those each day. The reality is, for people who are technically savvy, it's actually really easy to get into HOLOCHAIN quickly. You can build applications rather quickly. And we also have a series of online trainings available, including a 4-day workshop called a dev camp that we do every month or two. We've just finished our second developer training camp. That, I think the most recent one had 50 people in it, and it wrapped up just a few days ago.
You know, I actually was reading about HOLOCHAIN, right? So came across this metacurrency project. What I found out is that, in fact, HOLOCHAIN, the head architect, I think Arthur, Mr. Arthur, Arthur Brock, sorry. So he's been working on this idea, like metacurrency project, since 2001, which is almost like 8 years ahead of when Bitcoin came out, you know. So this idea was in pipeline. And however, so when you talk about the peer-to-peer, building an app, peer-to-peer, now Bitcoin introduced like the first in 2009, right?
2008, yeah.
2008, 2009.
Yeah.
And so do you think that since, if this idea was, if in any way was introduced a little earlier, is this the first application that world would have come across? Just like people have come across blockchain being the first one, something like that?
I don't know. I mean, I've been working, so Arthur had been working on this stuff for a long time. I've been working on this stuff since about 2007.
Yeah.
But we're coming from such a different place than the blockchain community came from, in both in terms of our intention and our architecture, that the reality is blockchain helped us a lot.
Oh, is that true?
Even though they got it wrong, in my opinion, even though the architecture is a fairly flawed architecture, and the main reason why it got so popular was because people could gamble on it.
Absolutely, yeah.
When I was trying to have conversations with people about peer-to-peer computing in 2007, nobody was interested, right? You would start diving into the details and they would go,
people are still not interested, guess what?
At some level.
Unless there are some monetary values.
It's different. There are yes and. there are large organizations, there are governments, there are major institutions who have people that they're willing to pay to go look at this stuff because they've been told it's important.
Yeah.
Now, even if what they were told was important was blockchain, and they've, through their own research and experimentation, have started to realize, oh, this stuff doesn't work, it doesn't change the fact that they're looking. And so, because they're looking, us being able to provide a different architecture that does work is landing in a context that is right. It's like planting a seed in fertile soil instead of planting it in the desert. Now, right now, it's December 2018, right? It's the crypto, abyss, basically. It's been a whole year of pricing and all that kind of stuff going into the tank. And so for people who were focused on blockchain from a I'm going to get rich quick perspective, they think that the world is over. From my perspective, that's just reality visiting what was essentially a Ponzi scheme. Something that didn't have real world value creation at its core.
Yeah.
And for us, because we think that this pattern ends up enabling people to solve problems that they couldn't otherwise solve, it will start getting picked up fairly rapidly. But the fact that blockchain came first helped.
It helped.
It helped. Because other people are interested.
Right.
Accounting wasn't sexy, even 5 years ago. How many young people did you talk to who went, oh, I'm fascinated with trying to figure out the future of accounting? What? Nobody. No one was interested in that. And yet suddenly, thanks to something that's probably going to cost a lot of people their life savings, right? Poor waitresses and bus drivers who poured their money into cryptocurrency, they're going to lose all of that. That's a bummer. But one of the side effects of this cryptocurrency boom was that it got the world paying attention to new forms of communication and thinking that it mattered. And for us, that makes it easier for people to, one, think about this stuff, because it's abstract, right? It's really hard to hold on to in your head. And unless you're convinced that there's something important there, you're not going to put in the time. But enough people at this point have put in the time, whether they are investors or business people trying to think of new models for how they can help coordinate and solve real-world problems, or programmers who are just trying to think of how they can build a system. They've put in the time, and they've started to gain enough familiarity with the space of decentralized computing that when our stuff comes along and starts solving problems that for the last year or 2 or 3, these people have become desperate to try to solve, it's landing in a different situation, and it can grow.
Great. I'm sure it is. I mean, there's so much of curiosity, there's so much of interest. And I think there's also, we recently saw a few incidents with Facebook, we saw with Google, and I think people have slowly started realizing that this is not the internet that we imagined of.
Yeah.
So we need a different internet, right? Peer-to-peer.
For folks like me and the people that I work with, we could see that a long time ago. Because we were geeky and we were close and we think through, oh, this is going to go there.
Absolutely,
But for the general public, who just, I'm trying to make food. I'm not thinking about how the internet is architected. But today, everybody feels, this isn't working for me anymore. This isn't working for us anymore. It needs to change.
True. Matthew, now let's talk about because this is your first meet here in India, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious to know, what's your perspective, because India is 1.3 billion, right? And there's so much of corruption going on. People already know that. It's almost at every level. And, so what do you think is the potential for a country like India where, these applications are required, the peer-to-peer applications are required? And what is the HOLOCHAIN's plan for India so far? How do you look at this market? I would say whatever.
So the funny thing is, I at least, and I think we as an organization, don't tend to look at places as markets.
Absolutely not. That's the reason I was actually hesitant that I should be saying that. It's not a market. Absolutely not.
We think about these things in terms of relationships and communities. And there's a couple of things that India in particular has going for it. one, it has problems.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, there's lots of problems
Yeah.
present. And they're problems that no one person high up in the bureaucracy, whether it's the corporate world or the government world, is going to be able to solve.
Yeah, not at all.
Our problems, not just in India, but globally,
Yeah.
are problems that require us to
Yeah.
participate in solving.
Absolutely.
So the fact that there are big problems is a good thing in terms of there being an appetite to try new stuff.
Yeah.
Two, there are a lot of people in India that are familiar with software,
Yeah.
that are skilled software developers. That matters. If you have people who know how to build software, they have the basic tools for being able to try something new.
True.
And if when they try something new, it starts to work, they will go, oh, this works! And then other people will get inspired and will try another new thing, and it will grow.
Yeah.
The last thing that I'll say is, and we're trying to support many different languages, but the reality is HOLOCHAIN is being initially built in English. I generally speak in English.
Yeah.
There is a lot of English speakers in India, and because that exists, even though not everyone speaks English, because there are a lot of people who do, they will start.
Yeah.
And then many of those, like yourself, will translate.
Yeah.
And then they will translate materials.
Yeah.
And so that creates a bridge early on
Yeah.
into supporting this community.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what I actually pointed out was towards the fact that India is known to be a tech hub. You know, you have so many developers. So, and not only that, we have enough number of tech developers. At the same time, there is a great need of decentralized applications that people need to start using and building, you know, in terms of users.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we need new applications being built that people can use it, because I think there's a great need because of the numbers, you know.
Well, and I will say one other thing. So I've come to India with one of my colleagues, and we'll have another showing up in a day or two, because we think that there's a lot of potential here. But we're not trying to grow a India solution. We're trying to grow a global community of people who are solving real problems.
Yeah.
And what I think will happen is that some talented woman or man or small team is going to solve a problem having to do with bicycle deliveries or elder care or maintaining a community garden, something, or growing food in an urban setting. They're going to coordinate activities in some way that's simple at first, but that solves their problem. And they're going to share what they've learned with someone in Romania. And someone in Germany is going to go and build on that and share back. And I think that with little seeds, but shared, we're going to see communities start to solve their own problems in ways that have never before been possible. And it's not that that group of people in the neighborhood in Mumbai is trading with someone in Munich. That's not necessarily the case. But they may be facing similar problems, and they may be able to learn from one another's experiments. And the cross-pollination is really what we're wanting to start here. We're wanting not just an international one. We really want to start local community. People coming together, sharing their learnings. I want to see people going out, group of 3, build an application, come back next month to the meetup, and show off what you've done. Say, hey, we tried this. This sucked. HOLOCHAIN is no good at this thing right now. You know, maybe we should build something here. But we tried this. It was great for this. And that makes it so that everybody else in that community can go away, and then a month later somebody else comes back and shares another new learning. And with that, I think we'll see a real acceleration. The saying, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together.
That's so true.
Matters.
You can learn a lot by being together than trying to learn all by yourself.
That's right.
So, Amazing, Matthew. It was amazing having you. Before we wrap this up, tell us, like, for all the entrepreneurs who will be watching this, or for all the people, all the developers who are thinking of building some applications on HoloChain, what are the one advice that you have? Where can they go? Where can they learn more about this?
Sure. So the first thing I would say is keep it simple, right? Start small, crazy small. Even if you have a big company, you have big problems you want to solve, make it fun. Do something that's going to take you an afternoon. You can literally build HoloChain applications in 4 hours if you have some developers with web development skills. So make it easy, make it fun, just to get started, to gain familiarity. And play. Don't worry about, oh, are we going to make $1 million or something off of the... No, the goal here, at least at this stage, is to build familiarity, to build community, so that you can then have enough knowledge to ask the right questions to know what to build to solve the real problems. Right. In terms of where to go, holochain.org, HOLOCHAIN.org is our website for HoloChain. For those who are interested in Holo, the web hosting marketplace that is basically the first big HoloChain app and that we are using to help subsidize the growth of the HoloChain ecosystem, that's available at holo, HOLO.host, H-O-S-T, holo.host. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Matthew. It was a pleasure talking to you. Wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.